In medical device development, regulatory compliance is often seen as something that comes at the end of a project. However, most of the problems we see don't come from regulation itself, but from discovering regulatory requirements too late. When standards, hazards, or classification implications surface late in the development, they tend to lead to costly redesigns, additional testing, and uncertainty around the timelines. Our approach is to consider eventual compliance even in the earliest stages of projects. This helps to give focused development goals and clarity, whilst applying best practices in a way that doesn't overburden early development and growing development teams. There are 3 questions that are particularly important to answer early. The first is, what is the clinical risk of the device, and what does that imply for classification? So classification drives the depth of design controls, the verification strategy, and the overall scale of the evidence that will eventually be required. For example, a wearable biosensor might initially be a moderate risk device, but if it informs clinical decision-making, such as insulin dosing in the CGM, the regulatory classification, software lifecycle expectations, and the verification burden can change significantly. The second question is, what regulatory pathways have other devices followed? Public databases such as the FDA, 510K, PMA, and de novo submissions provide real-world insight into what regulators have previously accepted. These submissions often highlight not just the core standards that are applied, but also any additional verification tests that have been introduced to mitigate specific clinical or technical risks. Reviewing this precedent early helps teams to understand what has been accepted before and to anticipate requirements that would otherwise be missed. The third question is, what key hazards are at the concept level? So rather than performing a clause-by-clause standards review, a light touch hazard analysis can be used to identify the most significant patient and user risks. In implantable or wearable biosensors, this often includes sensor accuracy, biocompatibility, sterilization, electrical safety, and cybersecurity. This doesn't have to be an in-depth or a costly exercise. Instead, it can act as an early sanity check to ensure that the product architecture contains all the key features that will eventually be needed for safety. All in all, thinking about compliance early doesn't slow you down, but instead allows teams to focus and be confident that they are designing the right thing the first time around.